Welcome back. In case you're just joining us, the topic again is the health implication of Lassa fever. And with me in the studio is a medical personnel. Let's make welcome Dr. Folashade Olugbemi Paul.
Vivid view.
Say and do it.
Before discussion proper, please follow us on social media handles are displayed on the screen, please. All right, welcome again, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, brief perspective or introduction on the subject matter.
Okay, Lassa fever is one of the infectious diseases that are currently of global significance, and in our environment in Nigeria, and actually in the whole of West Africa, from places like Sierra Leone, Guinea, it's an infection that is actually carried by the common African rat. They call it the Mastomys rodent. It's a very common rat. It's prevalent in most parts of West Africa and all the neighboring countries, and a lot of people eat it, and not just do they eat it, it's also present in their environment where they live, and so it goes into their food and it can drop feces there or its urine, and those things that come from the rats, both the rat as a whole, when it is being eaten, when they're preparing it or when they're consuming it, and it's the bodily fluids of the rat can actually infect the food of people, and it's that interaction between people and the rat that can actually lead to human beings getting that Lassa infection. And that's how it is really spread. It's a viral hemorrhagic fever, similar in some ways to Ebola, and it causes bleeding, and it's very significant, and it can lead to death.
So this small rat again is one causing this.
It's the virus that is in the rat, not the rat itself that is causing it. But yeah,
that's true. Okay. We may wish to know the likely causes of it, maybe part of what you have just mentioned now.
Yes.
And then how do you prevent it as well?
So, when you already know the vector of an infection, which in this case is the rat, it's easier to prevent it. Some things can cause somebody to be in more proximity to the rat, low socioeconomic background, the poorer communities. You can have places where food is stored but not stored properly, areas that are closer to bush, so places that are not very clean, things like that. If you can improve your environment, for example, it will limit your exposure to the rats, and by limiting your exposure to those common African rats, then you limit the interaction of your own food with their own body fluids, and that way you can actually avoid it. But not only is it spread from the African rat, there's also a person-to-person contact of Lassa fever. Wow. It's highly infectious between people. So while that is the vector, it's also transmitted by interaction between people. And so if you do see somebody having some of the symptoms, unfortunately in this environment, a lot of people term everything malaria, typhoid,
exactly.
And that is not so. Cough, catarrh, for example, are not signs of malaria.
And they will go for self-medication.
Yes, they go for self-medication, or they just say, oh, it will go. Especially because a lot of people can be asymptomatic, not really have symptoms, or just have very mild to moderate symptoms like sore throat, body pain, things that they typically might dismiss. And in dismissing it, most people would be fine at the end of the day, but in some people, up to 20% of the people that are infected can actually have more serious infections. So about 3 weeks or so after you've had contact with the virus, it can then lead to the actual disease. And in a lot of people, it's just feel like you have catarrh, cough, it might just feel mild, like your body's paining you, things like that. But in at least 1% of those 15-20% of people that actually end up needing medical care can actually die. 1% sounds like a small number, but that's about 5,000 people.
Yeah.
And that's a very significant disease burden,
yes.
In this environment. And so it's just easier, better to prevent it and to be more aware. So it requires a high index of suspicion. You need to be more aware. In advancing disease, when somebody is going to have more symptomatic disease, some of the things that you can see would be, after the initial sore throat, fever, body pain and things like that, you might then have the person coming down with bleeding from the eyes or the gum. So it's a viral hemorrhagic fever, virus bleeding fever. That's really what it is. So that's why I said in some ways it's kind of similar to Ebola, though the vector in Ebola is the bat. So if you know that you have all those rats in the environment, or there's a high index of suspicion, or somebody you know has been ill with something similar, you really should isolate yourself and get yourself to medical care as urgently as possible.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, that some people that suffer, you may not know, they think it's malaria. But I also know that, or you can also correct us that sometimes if you have malaria, you have blisters. By the gum, by your mouth and all that. Is it part of it also?
I'm glad that you're mentioning that malaria doesn't cause blisters.
So what causes that?
That's herpes.
You see, and we'll just say that it's
That's
malaria.
Another viral thing. So typically what happens is that the person's immunity is down, the person's body is kind of down, busy dealing with something else. So one small thing that your body has been able to suppress will then get reactivated, and then the sores come out. So the sores are only associated, and the sores themselves, it's an infection, it's a viral infection too. Okay. And that's the thing about viruses. They're really very difficult to treat, very difficult to kill. Wow. I mean, we've been struggling to treat and cure things like HIV for a really long time now.
Yeah.
And, Ebola and COVID and all of those viruses that we know of, they're really very difficult to treat. So that's not what causes malaria. Okay.
But in some other areas, you find young ones going hunting for these rats, especially the one we call bush rat. We have bush rat, we have rats in the homes and all that. They go hunting for it.
Yes.
So they can also be exposed by doing that.
Very, very true. Most definitely. The preparation, the cleaning up of that rat, trying to clean it and make it edible, trying to prepare it for a meal is one of the points at which people can actually get infected with it. One interesting thing about this infection is the fact that unlike, one of the complications of it that might not even require you being very seriously sick to the point of the bleeding and the fever is hearing loss. So it is one of the causes of hearing loss. Hearing loss is one of the complications of Lassa fever that, doesn't even require the disease being very serious and very advanced for you to see it. So if you have anybody around you too that alongside having mild prodromal symptoms, those, headache, fever, sore throat, whatever, and then the person is now complaining about their ear, or you're having to shout too much
before you now hear.
Maybe you should go get checked. For it.
All right, thank you so much. One of the reasons why I ask this question, like we usually say, prevention is better than cure.
Yes.
So that when you know how to run away from certain things, you'll be able to, to take care of it. Now we'll take a break now. Vivid View.
Say and do it.